Patricia O'Connor and sleepy Frida Reva Darcy here. We have been enjoying one beautiful day here in Alameda, California today. Everything is just looking so nice out. The weather is high 60s, not a lot of wind. I've started bringing everything closer to the rail. Everything is closer to the sunshine. I'm not as worried about the abundance of water the way I had been before. And I'm not as worried about the gale winds the way I had been before. And to that end, by moving stuff out, I'm finally starting to see a little bit of movement. There's the first little, I believe, unless I missed something, I believe that's the first little Japanese black pine to pop its head up. And since quite a few of these were back behind me in the colder area, it might be a few days. There might be a few trays like that that'll start popping up here pretty quick. But I expect to see a few more little pines popping up here for long. While we're talking about stuff, I watched a program earlier today. I watched one of my lessons, and it was a 2-hour lesson. I get 2.5 hour, more or less, lessons a week on a little paid subscription thing I do. And I am really so far I've been making pretty good use of it. But they were talking about the stages of development of bonsai. And, I'm going on, a couple of years at this, and I'm starting to try to take all the information not all the information, but the information that I've been accumulating over those few years and trying to put them in some sort of scale, with some sort of sense of order. It's like this tree is in this pot for this reason, and this tree is in this pot for this reason, and this tree is in this pot for this reason. So you do things and you start things, and all the while we're learning and we're picking up. This little guy, the 14-year from seed, it's in more of a finished state today. This year we will do our candle cutting, and we will also thin the needles to redistribute the energy. This guy was in a finished state, but it had a hard time a couple of years ago. Also, it is a cork bark. Also, it is elderly. So last year we didn't do a candle pruning, and this year we probably won't either. We're going to take that. We will, however, redistribute the energy by thinning the needles somewhat. This guy was at one point in its more tertiary stage, or in its final stages, but since then it had dieback before I bought it, and it has since then had dieback, and I've been rebuilding it ever since. The last couple of years I've kind of figured out what it is I'm supposed to be doing, and to that end I've almost got the foliage back. I've almost got the tree looking pretty much about like the tree I bought. The tree I bought, I was looking at it and I thought, well, this looks like it's had a little bit of dieback, and it's got a couple of little dead leaves on it. And then I got home and saw that a lot of those dead leaves were all belonging to the same branches that were kind of snaking around there, and I had quite a bit of cutback to do. So after that, I've been trying to learn about cork bark oaks and how not to have it be such a log, and I've had several ideas pertaining on how to do that. But in the last couple of years, I've learned about pruning back things to redistribute the hormones and the auxin, and to tell the hormones in the tips that get released tells the rest of the tree to start that little king of the hill game, so everything starts flushing back out more. And once I learned that and then started feeding and then increased my watering a little bit, we started seeing a lot more work on this tree. But that is just the stuff that I've learned since I've had it. What isn't going exactly to plan since I've learned more about it is we're in a rebuilding stage. I'm not in the final stages of refinement with this tree, we're in the secondary stages of refinement. In other words, there's a little bit of foundation work laid, and now we're looking to cut those back at the end of the year and have those bifurcate off, and we'll cut those back and start making some tertiary. But in this stage, like the second year of that first foundation work, is kind of where we are. We're in between the foundation work and the secondary. So some of it is still going to be foundation, and some of it is going to be, our second round, right? We're going to have to start clipping some of that back off at some point. But all the while, we want this stuff to thicken and get a little, and get mass and help us get taper into our trunk and all of that stuff. But this isn't the right pot for this. This is the pot that it was in when it was in the bonsai garden that was being done by Johnny Cedar at Groveway Bonsai before COVID. So this is the pot that would have it roots refined. This is the one that it would have to do the final stages of root work. So right now I've got a stage 3 pot that's restricting, and I've got a secondary or a stage 2 tree, stage 1, stage 2 tree, and I've got a stage 3 pot. So that's a compromise. Am I going to up pot it? Well, I had thought about it. I've been thinking about it. I just genuinely looking at it, thought all the stuff that I wanted to grow, and I wanted this tree to grow, that just didn't seem like a big enough pot to me. But that wasn't really based on anything more than a gut feeling the day I brought the tree home. And in the last year or so, I've kind of come to know that it might not be the case if the tree were finished, but it is the case now that we've got a lot of rebuild to do. So no, I probably won't circle back and buy a larger container for this tree and then try to find room for it up here. That'll just be something that we're dealing with. But when you see me growing this tree and trying to reconstruct this secondary and this tertiary and get all of this refinement, we are doing that despite the pot size. This would be the time that the thing would probably go in a larger training pot, maybe a mica pot. Maybe I would up it into a large wooden box or something like that. And that way, also, there's a lot of talk about, you always hear why we use akadama and stuff like that is to get fine roots, and you're always hearing people when they repot their finished trees and they talk about their root work and stuff, and they're always bragging about those fine roots. So to that end, while we're talking about what we've done wrong and what we're doing right, the oak tree, the cork bark oak, I think is on the right track for me to be able to develop a nice canopy out of this. It's going to take a little bit longer than it should because of the pot size. It's not going to allow the roots to allow this to happen faster. We're going to go at a slower rate over that. Now, when it came to this, that is the right size pot. That's not a bonsai pot. Those are 3. That's a grouping of 3 bald cypress, and they've got a lot of ramification. They've got a lot of taper to build in their trunks. We've got a lot of woodwork to do, and when I decided to go no compromise, so I got a really good mica deep pot, and these guys had already had a certain amount of root work done to them, but they were chopped, which that's on one hand, the root work would have allowed us to plant these guys in a bonsai container. On the other hand, being chopped meant that we were going to have to grow this until it becomes basically that. And so we're not going to do that overnight, and you're not going to necessarily, and if you do that, try to do that in a bonsai pot, it's going to take a lot longer. Also, what I did underneath this Boon Mix, which is the top dressing, is all Akadama, because having heard numerous times everybody bragging about all of those fine roots that they were wanting, and knowing that Akadama does retain water somewhat, I decided to fill that up with the most expensive soil possible. That was a mistake. Had I gone with something that was bigger chunk, kind of like what my top dressing is, lava, pumice, Akadama, for instance, then I would have had it wouldn't have made fine roots. I know, didn't we just talk about how much everybody likes fine roots? Right now we have to make large pieces of wood, and you do that with large roots. You make fine ramification with finer roots. The finer the roots, the finer the little stuff. Right now, what's in our future? A lot of huge lumber making. So, on one hand, I have the trees, excuse me, I have the trees in a position to succeed. I have learned about what it is I'm supposed to be doing when it comes to pruning. We're going to allow everything to flush out as much as it can, stir up as much photosynthesis as possible. We've got a large container so that we can emit a large amount of root mass, and so that a large amount of root mass can handle the amount of sugars and starches that this large amount of foliage is going. And with that little conveyor belt of energy going back and forth, we're going to make a lot of foliage, and we're going to gain a lot of girth and create a lot of lumber. That is not the time to go for the finer soil Akadama with all those little micro holes in it that are going to try to make finer and finer soil. This would have been the time for something that was, a little chunkier, a little bigger, would have made bigger roots, and those bigger roots would have helped us made bigger parts. So my compromise that I got wrong when I started this one a year and a half ago was I went with some fairly expensive, very large container of full of Akadama. That's probably, maybe a quarter. No, probably more like, maybe a quarter. It's pretty fine. So when that should have been something a little bigger and a little chunkier. So that will slow down our growth there. But these guys are also would have been in, these guys are in their secondary as well. And we're going to be doing the secondary thing there for quite some time. The oak also would be in its foundation or primary or secondary stage of development, and it's coming through pretty nice. We're going to be able to slow down some of the cutback on it this year. We're still building secondary on quite a bit of this stuff. The Dawn Redwood, that is an example of rebuilding our foundation. It's still a little over potted. That's a large pot for that. It's the one I got it from, and it's not a bad sized pot. We're feeding it. We're making sure the water is right. We're going to try to let it dry out in between waterings and see how much we can get that guy to rebuild a canopy. And that brings us to our little experimental trees. This was 2 orders. This is most of this and part of these in here, or 2 orders of 10 Japanese black pines from 2 separate vendors, one in Florida and one in Oregon. The ones in Oregon were superior. We did lose one. We lost one about a week ago. That was from the superior trees, and it wasn't their doing. It was one of the trees that I had done a rebend on. Like I'd bent it a bunch and then decided I didn't like it and then totally rebent it. I scarred that thing all to be darned, and it didn't respond well to that and died. That was totally on me when I saw that the tree was turning yellow, and then before it wasn't yellow like it's wet. It was yellow like before it turns red. When I looked at it, all I saw was a whole bunch of scars all over this part and this part, where I had done a inadequate job of wiring on that tree, rookie mistakes. And when I went back to try to do the shape of the tree better, that bad wiring just created more scars on it, and that all got into the candium and messed that up. And basically, I just scarred that tree up, and it lost its energy and dried up. The last couple of nights, last night, y'all saw me work on this ponderosa. I'm pretty happy with the work that came out of this tree. I think it came out looking, I'm pretty excited about all of that. I really shrunk the profile of that and made that a lot more kind of doable as something to have on my bench. So yeah, pretty excited there. This is all, after all, this is just, other than that, that's pretty much a look at the same stuff that we looked at yesterday. I don't have a lot to add to that, except that I did want to say that out of the 2 sets of 10 trees that I ordered, the ones in Florida only shipped 9, so I received 9 and lost 4. They weren't in that great of health when they came in, but I probably or may have been responsible for at least a couple of those. In that, had I been more responsive to their needs, I could have saved them. Instead, I just kind of repotted them and bent them and played with them like they were healthy, and they weren't. So we still hold at 6 of those, and it's like these guys, and it's a couple of, like this guy here, that was one of those. So there were a couple of those, but this was an example of the other 10. And out of those 10, those turned out to be a lot healthier, and I was a lot more successful with them. And it took a lot. If you were wanting to know how all of that worked out with the experiment, the unhealthy trees we managed to kill 3 that may have died anyway. The top-notch trees that I went all Pulp Fiction on, and just hellaciously bent and wired and pruned and all that stuff, and just literally folded. I did manage to kill one by folding it and then deciding I didn't like it and folding it again after I'd wired it badly and scarred the trunk all up. So that took a lot, but everything else survived all of that and our deluge of water that we had. So yeah, that's a little look at our Mugo. And there's another one, the pine in the very back that's literati. That was one of the other one of the 10 that came in, and it's in a little shallow bonsai pot already. I would like to make a little literati out of that. So yeah, and in front of that is a little black pine that we did some shaping on this past winter, and next to that is frankenpine, which I will leave bound up like that until spring. And right now, all it has to do is just keep its little needles up and recover from its change of angle, from its repot, and from its heavy folding. But this tree has shown a lot of promise and has responded well to everything we did to it. So I would say, by and large, I've been kind of rough on some of the black pines. We've kind of figured out how much water they're supposed to have and not have, and I think once we've pegged that a little better, we started having better luck and finding them to be pretty resilient. So having kind of gotten a couple of them into shapes that I like, I'm backing off, just wanting to give everybody a little minute to recover from my moments of artistic endeavor and my mistakes. in equal measure, I suppose. Thanks a lot for taking a look. I just thought I would share a little bit about, what we're thinking about as far as the developing stages of bonsai, and they are basically the same as the stages of refinement on any one tree. They're going to be your foundation, your secondary, and your tertiary. And whenever you're working on your foundation, you should be working on your foundation of your root structure, and you should be working on the foundation of your branch structure, and you should be working on the foundation of the base and the taper of your tree. And whenever you start getting 60-70% of the way through, then you should do a transition to your secondary and continue to do your foundation and your secondary until you've phased out of one and entered to another 60-70% of that second phase, and then you shift into third gear, as we say. And that's just kind of like what we're doing, the things that we're doing right and the things that we're doing wrong. And I don't think I'm going to replant this and change this soil. We'll go with that, but just so you know, that's something that I could have done better. Just like I'm probably not going to go drop a couple of $100 on a training pot for this cork bark oak, but that too, for the amount of woodwork we have to do, is something we could have done better. But other than that, I think we for rookies, I think we've done pretty good all in all. Our trees always look pretty good in the spring, and in the summer, and in the fall, and the more I know, the better they look, and we haven't let anything go long enough to where it's messed us up too bad. So, yeah, I guess we've been lucky there. Like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. I got a package in the mail today from England, so we are going to have a little unboxing a little later on tonight, and that's going to be interesting. I have no idea. Not a clue. But thank you so much for watching.